Welcome. My name is Warren Greene. I'm a Ojibwe Two-Spirit Indigenous activist. And today we're here to just talk about the recent happenings of the murders and missing in the Toronto LGBT community. Today with me I have Susan Gapka, Doug Elliott, and James Dubro. And they'll all be coming up and briefly talking about issues that are concerned to us. I wanted today to acknowledge the land and water that we're a part of here, the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee. And as well, currently the Mississaugas of the New Credit. So I wanted to just welcome you all and introduce Doug Elliott, who is a lawyer in our community, an elder, as he calls himself, and he'll talk about what we would.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Warren. First of all, my name is Douglas Elliott, and first of all, I want to make it clear that while I am and have been connected with a number of community groups over many years, today I'm speaking as a private citizen and as a lawyer. This morning, I'm publicly calling on Attorney General Yasser Naqvi to immediately appoint a public inquiry under the Provincial Inquiries Act into the Toronto Police Service investigation of the recent serial killings of gay and bisexual men in this city. The time for that inquiry is now. Our community is grieving. Our community is angry. As recently as last December, we were being told by Chief Saunders that our long-standing concerns about a serial killer preying on our community were not based on any evidence. He was wrong. He had a legal duty to warn us, and instead, he reassured us. It now seems that there was plenty of evidence, but somehow the Toronto police struggled to put two and two together. We want to know what went wrong. We deserve to know what went wrong. The relationship between the Toronto Police Service and Toronto's LGBT community is at its worst since I joined in the protests in the streets out here against the bathhouse raids back in 1981. Nothing short of a full public inquiry is going to put us back on the necessary path to reconciliation with the Toronto Police Service. Serial killers are rare, but there will be another one. Perhaps the next time it will affect a different marginalized group. Will the police bungle again? There have been previous inquiries, for example, into the Bernardo case and into the Picton case. Did the Toronto Police Service learn the lessons from those cases? Somehow, I doubt it. And if we ask ourselves, are there more lessons to be learned from this investigation? I think most of us could agree that there really can be no doubt about that. 20 years ago, Justice Archie Campbell in the Bernardo Inquiry report was blunt in his observations that clever serial killers are a recurring and serious challenge to modern law enforcement. Ontario is not immune to them. Our law enforcement agencies have repeatedly failed to develop modern investigative systems to detect and apprehend these savvy predators at an early stage. These killers continue to outsmart our law enforcement officials for far too long before they are caught. Why are police always 2 steps behind instead of 1 step ahead? The mayor and the chief have both said that they would welcome a public inquiry. I applaud the internal review already underway at the TPS and the external review that the mayor is seeking tonight after consultation with respected community groups like ASAP. Even the Attorney General himself agrees that there ought to be a public inquiry. The question is, when? The Attorney General has said that we should wait for the, quote, conclusion, unquote, of any and all criminal proceedings. Such a lengthy delay is both unnecessary and completely unacceptable. The conclusion of the criminal proceedings may be many years in the future. We cannot wait until the criminal justice system has completed its work. The police have said that their investigation could take many more years. It's already been going on for 8 years. How long should we give them? While I respect the man, the Attorney General is wrong. There is no need to wait. First, there's no legal reason to wait. I believe there's a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions about this point. And I'm here this morning in part to clear that up. I've been involved in 2 major public inquiries, both involving fatalities. The Creever inquiry and the more recent Elliott Lake inquiry into the mall collapse there. In both of those inquiries, criminal investigations proceeded in parallel to criminal investigations. Criminal investigations running parallel with public inquiries. In fact, in the 2 inquiries in which I was involved, the police had not even gathered enough evidence to lay any charges by the time the inquiries got underway. In this case, the police already have enough evidence to lay 6 charges of first-degree murder against an identified accused. Ever since the Supreme Court gave its blessing to this 2-track approach in the Xtra mine case, this 2-track approach has been the usual, the preferred approach. There is no legal reason to depart from the 2-track approach in this case. Second, there is no practical reason to wait. The inquiry would be about how the investigation was handled, not about helping the police to gather evidence to help secure a conviction. The inquiry should focus on the events leading up to the charges laid in this case. Those events are a matter of historical fact, and they are not going to change as a result of anything being done by the police now. As the families of the Picton victims noted at the inquiry in that case, the passage of time only causes memories to fade and evidence to deteriorate, not to mention the anguish those families and friends experience. That is especially so in this case. The known victims were middle-aged men, the oldest 59, just a little younger than me. We can anticipate that many potential witnesses will be of similar ages and possibly even older. If we wait 10 or more years to get started, as happened in the Picton case, those witnesses might not even be able to give evidence. We will all suffer immensely waiting for answers. An inquiry is not going to stop or even impede the criminal investigation. No one is asking for that investigation to be put on hold. An accused person has been identified, and he is not going to be released from custody just because an inquiry is launched. He's not going anywhere. Of course, we all want the police to identify all the victims and to lay all of the appropriate charges. However, let's face it, if convicted of any of the charges that have already been laid, the accused man will never leave prison alive. More charges will not change his fate. Chief Saunders expressed surprise to the Globe that there was a serial killer at work in Toronto. He said it was something he watched on CNN and it did not happen here. That was a pretty shocking statement. The Bernardo report warned our police to expect serial killers again in Ontario, and Bernardo's crime spree began right here as the so-called Scarborough rapist. Apparently, the chief never learned anything from the Bernardo report, even though he himself worked in homicide for many years. However, let me be clear. This is not about shaming the police. It is about making sure that they do a better job the next time. We should learn from the mistakes made in BC. The Picton inquiry was delayed for 10 long years while the criminal justice process unfolded. The inquiry report was not released until 2012. It found there was a botched investigation that was hampered by outdated police techniques and police procedures. Not to mention systemic bias, as the victims were viewed by the police, in the words of the commissioner, as throwaway people. Did unconscious bias play a role here? By 2012, when the Picton report was released, at least 3 gay or bisexual men had fallen victim to a serial killer in Toronto. Project Houston was launched that same year. Sadly, Project Houston was shut down 18 months later with no arrest. The killings continued. I have to ask myself, did the Project Houston officers even read the Picton report? While we now debate the timing of an inquiry into the most recent serial killer investigation, the next serial killer may already be at work, perhaps even right here in Toronto. We need to learn the lessons from this unhappy investigation, and we need to learn them without any further delay. Lives are at stake. Thank you. I'm very sorry I cannot stay for questions. I have business commitments. I've left my business cards and a copy of my statement with my friend James, and you should feel free to contact me. I'm not trying to avoid the journalists or community members here today, but I do have other professional commitments. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Doug. Now we'll have Mr. James Dubro speak. He's a crime reporter and researcher and a longtime member of our gay community here in Toronto.
Good morning. That's a lot to digest there in what Doug said, and there's a couple areas where I'm going to overlap, and I'm not going to speak very long. I just wanted to read a couple of points from our position paper. Lives at risk today, in particular from our marginalized communities under the rainbow. Shortcomings in how police collect, store, coordinate, and share data appear to have allowed Bruce McArthur to continue to murder. McArthur was charged in 2001, questioned in 2013, and again in 2016 with incidents that we now know are relevant to the case. But none of these connections were made in time to prevent a series of deaths that may have otherwise been prevented given the proper systemic improvements. That's point number one. Project Houston, which is Doug had just said, should not have been shut down. Like homicide investigations, the series of disappearances involved with Project Houston make it clear that the project should have remained open, and rather than Project Prism being created, Houston should have continued as more information ultimately came in, which perhaps might have prevented future deaths. Very important. The third point I haven't actually written out because it's still evolving, and it has to be, and it's not one that's our position paper, but this has to do with the fact that McArthur had a criminal record for violently attacking a hustler in the gay village, and he was brought in, as I just said, in these two instances, but the criminal record doesn't appear to have popped up when he was questioned by Houston when he was questioned by an officer investigating an attempted murder that he was charged with. Now, I have found out just today, really, that the reason that may not have popped up on police investigations is that he had got a pardon for his conviction, which was a serious conviction. That's fine, but the problem is not even police intelligence seems to have had access to those, the fact that he was convicted of violence in the gay community. Because if they had, that would have been a red flag right away when he was brought in Houston. That would have made him a person of interest, and also when he was brought in for the attempted murder. It would have been an extremely important thing. And yet, it's just amazing to me, inexplicable and amazing and incredibly inept that the police did not have access to their own records. We'll have to find out. That's what an inquiry will help us find out. That's all I'm going to say right now.
Thank you, James. We'll now have Susan Gapka speak. She is a community and trans activist, also independent as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm Susan Gapka, S-U-S-A-N, Gapka, G-A-P-K-A. We've released a statement, just a situation that has brought us here today, reluctantly appearing before you, but feeling there's a lot of unanswered questions around this, as Douglas and James have already spoken to. I just want to first say that still my thoughts and my prayers are with the murdered and missing people, the families and friends, and everyone negatively impacted. And partly what I want to talk today about is to bring an equity lens to the conversation, to talk about Dean and Alora Wells, whose systemic discrimination and other social factors led them not to be taken as seriously when they went missing by the authorities, and that needs to change, and we need to do more work on that, but also of the situation that put them in extremely high-risk situations. As a former street kid myself, I can really relate to it, and actually I was re-traumatized because I had visited a number of the places that Dean himself had been involved with back more than 20 years ago, before I actually did get off the street. So I just wanted to just sort of give them a moment of appreciation, or not appreciation, but a moment of remembrance, commemoration for that. And I'll do that just in a few minutes. The other thing I wanted to bring to the conversation was we can do a lot better around that. And even, I'm not qualified to speak around race and some of the other factors involved in the other missing people. But actually, as Douglas and I were talking yesterday about, there are a series of public inquiries, and I've worked in the mental health field, and we've taken the police to task in coroner's inquest, and time again a set of recommendations are not adhered to, are not implemented, and still we have people going missing and not found, or found in this manner. This is unprecedented. But if you were in training to be, I don't want to use a serial killer analogy, but in some ways, these inquests, the police should have been following the recommendations of previous inquests. This would be a guidebook in how to get away with murder if you were trying to do it. And that's what happened in this case, it seems, that there was it happened many years later before the police broke the case. And of course, it's not to shame the police. They actually broke the case, and the person is alleged until proven guilty, but it looks like a heap of evidence is going to keep this individual locked away for a long, long time. The other piece that I wanted to talk about was the relationship between police and community members. It's that I think it continues to be strained. Last time it was G20, there was the G20, before that the Pussy Palace. But what happens is, before that, before my time, the bathhouse raids, there's a long history of disconnect between LGBTQ, Two-Spirit, non-binary members and the police services, so they really need to do better on that. I first met James when we formed the Chiefs Consultative Committee, and the original terms of reference for that committee was to meet in community settings, to have members elected by community members, by organizations, and for the last number of years they've been meeting at police headquarters. And as you know, there's higher security measures recently, so many of us do not feel comfortable going to police headquarters to engage with the police. They need to be more visible in the community and less visible in other ways. So we need to do a lot of work on police relations, and I have reached out to some members. I'm on the CPLC at 51 Division, and one of the sergeants down there, I talked to him yesterday, so we really need to somehow figure out that we can report people when they go missing, or report crimes or violence without fear of prosecution and violence from the police themselves. And there's a whole undercurrent of activity in the LGBT community. Our systemic and historic marginalization, our criminalization in the past make some of us very, very hesitant to do that. So I just wanted to highlight that we really need to do better on that. Just as I close here, I just wanted to take a moment of silence I realize this is not your real moment because there's media in the room, but I am going to start my timer. If we could just think about, just have that moment, and then we'll go to questions just around for the missing and murdered Rainbow community members. Just wanted to add again, we are individuals. We're not representative of any organization, and that's how we came together today. So let's have that moment now, please. Okay. I think we're almost ready for questions. Thank you for that moment of silence. As we leave here today, let's just remember those, because this is going to take some time, and it's been very traumatic.